Good afternoon. It's day 5 of PDC. Everybody's a little tired. Going to go home soon. We're going to take this panel and talk about the intricacies, nuances of public web services. This panel is going to take 90 minutes, but we think we're going to go a little long. We may go over lunch, and it's important that you stay here for the entire panel. Otherwise, you won't really get the entire message. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. Stated, I'm sorry. So, we're going to talk about what people are doing out in the wild with this stuff, trying to make some money, trying to make the planet a better place to live, trying to do no evil. I think nobody on this panel wants to do any evil. So what we're going to do is just talk about experiences along the way, where we're going, what we all see out there. So we're really lucky to have a very diverse panel of people today. We have a couple of people from the firm. We have a few people who are not from the firm. So it's a nice mix. So going from your right to your left, to start off, we have from PayPal, who, if you haven't noticed, sends you mail every day asking you to change your password. Dave Nielson. Dave, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do with the firm, with the PayPal?
Right. The PayPal firm. So yeah, PayPal, most of you know, we send out a lot of email. But actually, on that front, I just want to note that if you want, there is a free toolbar for Outlook that will zap all of those emails.
Whoa!
That's pretty
Do you know
cool.
the URL off the top of your head?
I do. It's paypal.com/safetybar. And it'll actually even zap Amazon spoof emails as well.
Thank you.
As well as any other spoof email that we come across.
Wow. That's a great... And is it free?
It's free. You even get free spam protection for 30 days, and then if you want continued spam protection, you'd pay for that, but you still get the free spoof protection ongoing forever.
Do we pay by PayPal?
And you can pay by PayPal.
Hey.
No, actually, we have to take an Amex. That'd be so cool.
Yeah.
Great, that's great.
So, yeah. Trying to do no evil out there and prevent others from doing some as well. So what we do at PayPal is obviously we have our web-based, URL-based API, more or less, where you can create a hyperlink that will link you to PayPal or link your customers to PayPal so they can pay you. And that's what we call our website payments standard product. But recently we've launched a new product called Website Payments Pro, and it actually lets you transact from your website to PayPal's website via web services so that even customers without a PayPal account can process credit cards on your website via a SOAP-based API via PayPal. And so we're basically taking that and extending that to also include services to send money from your business to, say, your partner businesses as well. So it's actually creating a payments network on top of SOAP.
Wow. Cool. Thanks. Next up, from MSN Search, the one, the only Seth Demsey.
Thanks, Don.
Tell us what you do. Seth.
Well, what we're doing over in MSN Search is, of course, building an internet-scale web search engine, but we're also adding web search APIs to the mix. And just recently, this week, in fact, we announced the availability of a non-commercial version, the first rev of our SOAP API. And we also have RSS feeds for search results that have been on the site for probably about 3 months now. So we're newcomers to the game of sort of real commercial web services. And I'm here to learn, just sort of like you are, about what's working and what's not, and where we should be going with this to make it more effective both for casual users and for commercial users of the API.
Cool. Now, as a book author, next panelist is very near and dear to my heart. Jeff Barr works at Amazon on their web services team. Jeff, you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Thanks, Don. So I'm Jeff Barr. I work on the web services team at Amazon.com. For the last 3 years, we've been building very large-scale public APIs to various parts of our Amazon platform. We have three main services. We have the e-commerce service, which provides access to millions and millions of items in our product catalog, very, very rich data schemas, access to our shopping cart as well. We have the Amazon Simple Queue service to let developers create a hosted queue data structure on an Amazon server. And we have the Alexa Web Information Service, gives you access to the web crawl data collected by our Alexa subsidiary, access to about 300 terabytes of data through that API. We do both REST and SOAP. I would say that we do evil, but I will leave it to you to decide which one of those would be evil or not. We basically try to meet developers' needs by issuing both REST and SOAP APIs. We've also got a developer contest running right now. If you go to amazon.com/AWS, you can participate in a contest sponsored by Amazon and Microsoft with lots and lots of really good prizes.
Cool, thank you. Next up, we have the man who is shipping Indigo out the door, the one, the only Eric Zinda, Pum of Indigo. Eric, tell us about what you do.
Yes, I'm Eric Zinda, and my job is to provide the infrastructure that these guys can use to do POCs, REST, SOAP, WS Star, MSMQ, whatever kinds of messaging they need to do to deliver what they need to do for their business, and to allow you guys to call those things using a single unified API. And we call that Indigo, affectionately known as the Windows Communication Foundation. I think you've heard plenty about that today, so I'm here to answer any questions about that.
And you'll notice Jim Johnson gave me his team shirt, the Windows Transaction Foundation.
Yes, I don't know if we've announced that name yet.
And finally, Mr. Martin Gudge.
Hi, I'm Gudge. I've worked on a bunch of these specifications over the last years. Worked on SOAP for quite a while, XML schema, a bunch of the WS Star specs. Currently a feature PM working somewhat indirectly, but for Eric, on the security side of our product, specifically to do with authorization. And I'm just here to be the kind of protocol wonk for Don.
Great, fantastic. So I have a few things I'd like to hear what you guys want to know about, but I'm going to use invoke moderator privilege and ask my questions first. So we'll get through those, and then we'll pull some questions from the audience as well. What I'd like to find out first, especially from the folks who actually have public-facing web services, although Eric, if you have a public-facing web service, you're in this game, man. But mainly for you three, can you just tell us, what you found that works and what you found that doesn't work?
Okay, so first of all, we launched our public web services about a year and a half ago. And the first web services we provided did not actually perform new transactions. You could use the web services to query transaction history, get transaction details, perform refunds on existing transactions. And so our initial strategy was just to provide access to the data that you already had created. And we found that worked great for large businesses who already had the infrastructure in place to implement a web services stack, and especially those who are using more of the more established either .NET or Java languages. However, what we found didn't work is that, and I'm not saying this just because it's a Microsoft conference, but a lot of the LAMP stack wasn't really up to the standards that we had expected, and we ran into a lot of problems there working with our non-Java or non.NET community. And a lot of that had to do with just the old versions that are out there. And so really, at the end of the day, the problems that we ran into is that there's just a lot of old stuff out there that you have to figure out how to work with. And that was our biggest problem.
And what did you find the mix was of, .NET/Java, which I'll just put it in one bucket, versus the Perl, Python, PHP, Ruby, stuff?
Yeah. Well, it really varies based on the size of the company you're working with. In the high end of the largest companies, you'll find a lot more of the Java.NET crowd. And they have sophisticated, what I call software engineers, who are familiar with making API calls, objects, and that sort of thing, and SOAP wasn't that difficult for them. However, as you move lower in the total payment volume, as we refer to it, you find a lot of smaller businesses. You kind of find the web scripters out there, those folks who really aren't object-oriented programmers, but they're very, very effective scripting developers. And they're the ones who struggle with whether it be classic ASP or PHP. You find some .NET there. You don't see a lot of Java actually in the smaller business space. And those are the ones that we try to reach. So we found it particularly painful in having to work with them and provide interfaces in a way in which they could access.
And I'm curious, at that level of, for that market share, I'm guessing there was a fairly wide spectrum of things. So it wasn't like if it was like everybody was PHP, you guys could have ponied up and written a PHP implementation. But did you find a concentration on one particular programming platform?
Okay, so it turns out that there's quite a lot of PHP out there in the small business space. There is actually quite a lot of ASP, classic ASP. And you're starting to see more of the .NET out there as well. Very little Java in that space. But you'll also see Perl and Python, Cold Fusion. And so we want to make, every one of these implementations is money to us. So we want to make sure that they're all implemented. And we've had to make choices, and we did that based on the percentage of merchants out there using a particular language. So we currently have SDKs that we've provided for PHP, .NET, and Java. And we're working on solutions, not necessarily complete SDKs, but solutions for classic ASP and Cold Fusion.
I'm curious, the most notable exception from that list, are you seeing any adoption of Ruby on Rails in terms of that market?
A little. If you go search, I've gone to Ruby on Rails website, searched, you see PayPal sample code there. It's mostly integrated with our older product, our more established standard product, which is a URL-based API, so it's very easy to access. However, that means that your customers are being sent to PayPal, and so some larger merchants would rather have the API access, the SOAP-based API. But yes, with our standard product, it's very ubiquitous on the web. Every language that outputs HTML can link to us, and quite honestly, I think that is, by and large, the main reason in the developer community PayPal has been so successful. So we need to reach that kind of accessibility in the SOAP space, and we're not there yet.
Cool. Thanks. Seth, you run MSN Search. How's it going for you guys?
Well, like I said before, we're brand new in the space, and we're really trying to learn. We took the service live on Tuesday this week, and literally the third post in our developer forum up on MSDN is, I can't believe you, Microsoft. Why did you only include VB, .NET, and C# samples? The rest of the world wants to call this API. How dare you? And then the great thing is that probably about an hour later, some random person from the web posted a PHP wrapper class to our forum. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Live example up on the web. And I think we're going to face a lot of the same problems that you did around sort of stack adoption differences here and there. But we don't have any historical data on the mix yet. But at the end of the day, we want to target everybody. We want developers from the Microsoft platform who can just simply click and add web reference to use our web service. But we also want the entire rest of the web sphere who uses all these other different application stacks to be able to leverage our big back end that does great web crawling and relevance ranking of websites. So what we're trying to do now is basically see what does the mix look like. What level of investment does Microsoft need to sort of put up to get development across the broad ranges of platforms? Do we need to put out a PHP SDK as Microsoft, or is this a space that the community is going to fill and be happy, and we should just listen to sort of issues with the core SOAP service and evolve it over time?
Cool. Jeff?
Okay, so what worked really well for us is that we stayed totally away from doing client libraries. We thought that over time it would be much more beneficial, not just to us, but to our developer community, to educate them as to what the actual server-side standards were for invoking web services, whether that was just a URL-based API or SOAP. We put a lot of energy into just teaching them how to use these things, of working with them to get over issues in various SOAP clients as far as dealing with various different kinds of WSDL files and various issues with namespaces in the right place on SOAP envelopes. And we find that that's been helpful to us. We didn't have to put a lot of energy into building different kinds of client toolkits, And as different kinds of services are now emerging, we're able to go to our developer community and say, you know, we've kind of put you guys through maybe a little bit more of a rough time than you might have thought necessary, but we've really done a little bit of work to educate you, and everything that you've learned about XML and SOAP and XSLT, guess what? You can actually use that on a number of different web services, so feel free to thank us for giving you guys a little bit of extra education. We found that keeping things really, really simple is absolutely vital. I think there's a small group of people in the world, many of whom are at this conference right now, that understand all the complexities of actually dealing with all these really complicated standards. We have to be, I think, as a web services industry, careful not to push all these really cool things, very useful, very necessary things. Don't push them out too fast to the developers. Wait till the developers actually realize the need for them and kind of use a pull model for these things. Otherwise, there's a real potential to overwhelm developers with just this avalanche of acronyms.
Really?
Yes.
No.
Absolutely.
But we've only released like 1 or 2 every month. Wow. Cool. So, thanks. That's great. So I know that with Amazon, you guys have the policy of you basically support both HTTP, basically POX over HTTP and SOAP in parallel. Are you guys doing that as well?
No, currently we're only offering SOAP. And the main reason is that we're performing commerce transactions, which SOAP enables a little more securely. And the drawback, again, as I mentioned before, is that we require digital certificates to actually make that call. And not every platform supports that as well as we would like. We're working with the various platform vendors to make that happen. But, for example, in the PHP space, there is a SOAP-based library called Pair SOAP that was enabled very basic level of SOAP communication, but it did not support digital certificates. It did not support a lot of the headers that we required. So we actually engaged with the PHP community, actually paid some of the developers to make the improvements, and then required that they submit those improvements back into the community, and got the PHP toolkit up to the level that it would work with our APIs. But that's the kind of thing that we face, is that we have to go out and work with the community to get just up to the basic level to support our APIs, and that's not to mention, you know, the WS stars. So the SOAP method definitely limits your audience, but it does provide that extra security that we need.
And I'm curious, are there any platforms that have great support for handling certs?
You know what? I feel like this is a loaded question, but it's actually got a surprising answer, and that is that yeah, in the .NET and Java world, they work fairly well, except, and I know there's a few people in the audience at Microsoft who are going to know exactly what I'm going to say, because you've heard from me enough about this topic.
So this is where you're going to tell us how we suck, right?
Yes, exactly. In the hosted shared server environment where merchants are paying $10 a month and they have a hosted .NET or ASP website, commerce website, it's virtually impossible for them to host a digital certificate on that shared server to access our APIs. So it completely eliminates the entire ASP.NET 1.1 community, and we've had to really go through just enormous exercises in patience and headbanging to solve this problem, which we haven't completely solved yet. So that is one area where we really need to find some sort of solution, because if you're going to make money off these web services by communicating with PayPal, eBay, Amazon, any one of us, you're going to need some sort of security, and it's just not there yet.
And so, can I?
Yo, please.
Can I dive in? So Dave and I were talking about this earlier, and just to make clear what the issue is that there's support in the .NET framework for certs and for using certs over web services, but when you get in these massively hosted machines where you've got thousands of users, they end up running under the same machine account, or at least a group of users end up running under the same machine account. The cert store in Windows is keyed off the account you're running under, and so the issue is that getting only your cert and only your cert, not getting access to other people's certs is the problem. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct, and it's just it's the way the industry has gone about implementing hosted shared environments, where for performance sake and maintenance sake, they just run it all under one account, and then the application takes care of making sure that people aren't overlapping their data. But when you're relying on the OS to perform the security mechanisms for you, and then the OS, they're not implementing the OS correctly, then yeah, this is where the problem occurs. And quite honestly, I think it's a new problem. It's a problem that you haven't seen a lot of out there, especially with web services not even really being widely adopted in the public space yet. We haven't solved this problem, and it really needs to be solved. I'm hoping with .NET 2.0 some best practices can come about, but even there's still a little bit of weakness.
Great. So that brings up another question, which is, how exactly are people going to make money on a public-facing web service? I'm just JRandom guy with Acme Widget Corp. Show me the money. Where am I going to? How am I going to monetize?
Well, I think there's two answers to this question, and one of them I'm going to let Jeff answer, and because I know he's got a very good story there around the affiliate networks, referrals, and that sort of thing. And so I'll let him answer that question, or give that answer. With regards to creating your own web service, there's actually a lot of ways you can do it. One of them is just simply around membership. If you want to have some site that people need to pay for access to, web service is a great way to set up the account once and then use our APIs, perhaps, to actually make the call on a monthly basis to tell PayPal to just go ahead and take the money out of their account, put it into your PayPal account, and that's a very simple way to make money. And it's very convenient for the users. In fact, we have a new product that lets a customer just basically click over to PayPal, log in, and then click back right to your site, and the money can be withdrawn and set up to go on for subscriptions, recurring payments, that sort of thing. But specifically, if you have a web service that you want to enable, even if it's something very simple like RSS, in IIS 7, it's now modularized. You can create your own module to accept the RSS request, check to see if that cookie on that computer has paid for that RSS feed. If not, provide them a link or something in the RSS results to go sign up. But once they've signed up and their computer's cookied, then you can actually have a membership-based RSS feed that consumers have to pay for. And if you're providing some basic information that a lot of people want, and then providing a value-added service that you charge for, I think that's a very easy way, actually, to get started. But somebody needs to create that module that actually does the intercept. So we're looking forward to that.
Is it possible that PayPal is going to be producing such a module?
I think with the right community involvement, yes, absolutely. In fact, we'll probably someday hire one of you guys to actually build that for us.
Wow. Are you taking resumes?
Yeah, come see me afterwards if you're interested
Cool.
in something like that.
Great.
I wanted to pass this off by saying that that's really, if you're building your own service and your model is really that the web service itself is what people are paying for. So the actual content itself is what you're charging for. But in most cases, you have another type of service, whether it be, in eBay's example, an auction product or service that mostly takes place via users interacting with the website itself. But in order for you to get more customers, you need to be able to extend the reach of your website, and web services are a great way to do that, whether it be SOAP-based or RSS feeds. And so, I think Jeff might actually have a good story there.
Sure. Okay, so what we found at Amazon is it's really important that as you're envisioning all these new services is that you totally figure out that there's a business model for each new service. You don't. We found that if you try to do some kind of what I would call a science experiment web service, where you say, let's put it out now, we'll see if it's useful, and then we'll figure out what the actual business model is and how we'll monetize it, I think that's a really dangerous thing to do. So what we've done for each of the services is just figure out what is the most appropriate way that our developer customers can use them, and in a way that makes business sense for us and for them. For our e-commerce services with access to our catalog, there's two principal models that we support. The first is we support the network of nearly about 970,000 folks that are called Amazon Marketplace sellers. So Amazon Marketplace sellers use our APIs to identify proper prices, to do price optimization for books and other types of goods that they would like to list and sell on Amazon. So there's tons of room for them to be very innovative in terms of the kinds of algorithms that they create, and to figure out that they always want to be the lowest price third-party item on Amazon? Do they want to be somewhere in the top 5? What kind of price range would they like to offer? They do time-based optimization of items listed on Amazon. So in that case, they're making money because they can more effectively price the items, and they're hopefully going to sell more than they would if they were not using our services. The second model is the Amazon Associates model. It's the biggest affiliate program on the internet. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of associates. The way that works is that anybody who can join up for the Associates program. They can then use our web services to download data about all different kinds of products, take that data, put it on websites, put it in rich client applications, and then as people are out there browsing through those sites and they click through from that site over to Amazon, we actually take the identity of the developer, their associate account, we attach that to the user's browsing session, and we know that that developer sent us that traffic, and they can earn commission up to 10% based on the traffic that they send us. Actual revenues people are making from that range from folks who basically say, I want to earn enough to pay for my blog hosting or my website hosting, up to some organizations I'm familiar with that are making thousands of dollars per day as Amazon associates. So a whole range of different success levels, again, mostly based on how much investment they put in as far as, we give you the data, use it to create your site, and then the second step, figure out how to get lots of traffic to that site so those folks will hopefully click through and make purchases.
And we have 2 models that we're exploring. As I said earlier, today the search API for MSN is for non-commercial use, but we have a couple of sort of business ideas that we're going forward with in terms of commercializing the API. The first is simply a cost per query basis, where you can go ahead and issue a request and we'll just charge you some amount of money for a query. This makes a lot of sense in I consider data mining classes of applications, people that are using the content of the web, analyzing the data, and trying to figure out how to either make their website rank go higher or extract data for like machine learning purposes from a massive web archive. And the second model that we're looking at is actually a revenue share agreement, which is, hey, let's go put some ads in this as well, and give people who display the web results or use them in applications, web or client, as well as the ads, a cut of the ad revenue that is generated from that click-through. So, and there are probably a whole bunch of other business models worth exploring around the web data space, but those are the ones that we're looking at putting out in the near future.
Cool. Can I pick on something that Jeff said?
Yes.
About really thinking out about your business model as you kind of design your application. Something which is quite close to my heart is the whole security space. And a few people have talked to me recently about federation scenarios where you have a bunch of trading partners, they all want to talk to each other, and having those guys talk to each other directly and set up all the security individually quickly becomes an n-squared problem. And that really sucks. So people that are deploying those applications and providing those applications to those trading partners, one of the business models that they've been thinking of using is providing a federation service to simplify the security, and then they're just constantly adding value. Because every time a new trading partner comes along, that trading partner is then immediately available to all of the other people in that ecosystem. But they're providing that federation service, they can charge for the use of that federation service. And they're really thinking about that as they're building that application. And I think that as we build more complex web services and we build more complex distributed apps, we just need to be looking for those opportunities. Where are there possibilities to add value? Because all those trading partners don't want to run the security. They want they want it to work, but they don't want to have to host that service and administer it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's going to be true not just in Federation. There's going to be a whole load of different layers in the stack where that kind of opportunity is going to occur.
Well, that actually leads very naturally into my next question, which is why I invited you guys, because I knew you would always tee me up. How are you guys dealing with authentication of users and account management and making sure that the messages that come over the wire are in fact from the people who claim to be who they are? If that sentence parses.
Okay, so from our perspective, we want to be very, very certain who the person is again, we're moving money from one account to another. So we, as I mentioned before, we use digital certificates, client-based digital certificates that get installed on the client, or it could be a web server. to access our APIs. We also have a user ID and password for that specific account. So it's not the same one that you log into your account with. And beyond that, PayPal has a very, very powerful and experienced anti-fraud service, basically, within PayPal itself that analyzes the IP addresses, all the cookies, all the various bits of input that we get that tell us if this is a fraudulent transaction or not. So we use all of that, and it really takes more than just a digital certificate or just a user ID and password. You really have to build into your application from the beginning notifications, alerts, all the types of things that should raise a red flag if something unseemly is going on in your web service.
So it sounds like you guys are doing similar heuristics to what the credit card companies do. So when I go on a trip and I didn't use my credit card to buy the airplane ticket, and I start buying my wife expensive goods, sometimes I have to talk to the person on the phone.
That's right. We offer a lot of that same service. In fact, ours is a little more unique because often the transactions are going on not between a customer and a merchant, but perhaps what appears to be a customer and another customer. So a peer-to-peer transaction where we don't know much historical data about either party, and yet our anti-fraud mechanisms are able to actually capture that, evaluate it, and determine if we should let that transaction go through. And there's all sorts of issues you have to deal with, such as the new the Patriot Act has incredible implications here on moving money around. And so we've had to deal with all of these issues and spent a lot of time and money figuring it out. So especially when you take into account the implications of having a payments network that's all services-based, where money can actually go into your account for a service you've performed, and then if you need to pay out a various number of partners, you can immediately turn around and send that money out, and our algorithms are evaluating, should we let this transaction go through? So it's very complicated, and you have to build that into your application from the beginning in order to understand where you're going and not get ripped off.
I'm just curious, what programming technology do you guys use to build out the PayPal backend?
So ours is all C++. It's been a harrowing experience, let me tell you.
You have the smartest programmers on the world working on your team.
We have very smart programmers, actually, and we also have a lot of experience because we've been doing this for about five years. So, yeah. So you were also asking.
How we authenticate the users on the wire, how you do password.
Right. So we're rather heavy-handed in that. So we want to be absolutely sure. There are other mechanisms. eBay uses what they call an auth and auth, where they authorize and then authenticate a user so that the consumer or the merchant, who is the consumer, can actually use that web service via a third-party solution provider without having to go to log in to eBay every time. And so they've got a really clever system there, and we're looking to perhaps use something like that in the future. So that you log into eBay once, eBay passes a token that kind of represents that user ID and password back to the solutions provider, who might maybe host it on another system somewhere, and then they can, for a certain period of time, communicate back to eBay on the merchant's behalf. And that's a pretty slick method.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Gudge, you're smiling like a Cheshire cat. Did you have something to interject?
Oh, it just sounds like a federation scenario to me, Don, that's all. That particular scenario that was mentioned.
Seth, what are you guys doing?
Well, again, non-commercial today. What we're doing is just taking a token and sending it in with the XML that you push into the SOAP request that you push into the service. Certainly, when we move to a more commercial model, we're going to have to do something much more intelligent, much more secure than this today. Really, this is just a mechanism of tracking the count of queries because we do quota the amount of queries through the service today. And again, yeah, we're thinking about the right way to do this to be scalable, secure, and also easy to adopt over sort of the broadest range of platforms that our customers might be using.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Because I've heard two good examples. These two scenarios are kind of canonical examples that we think about, and the way these guys are describing are the way I see a lot of people building systems today. Which the first one was a way to do delegation of authority between me and somebody who might do something on my behalf, and the last one was simply authorizing me to do some particular set of operations. And today, what people end up doing quite often is rolling their own solution there. What was that? Are you pointing at you?
No, I was just shaking my watch.
Oh, okay. Winding his watch. And so what we've tried to do with the WS Star protocols that Gudge has so lovingly worked on for so long is to encapsulate these common patterns so that we and other software companies in the industry can start to build up tools so that these guys don't have to end up rediscovering how to securely do delegation or authorization over and over again. And so that when you build a website like this, you don't have to build a custom way to encapsulate your token or to do delegation. You can leverage the infrastructure that we've built and allow your customers to use pre-built tools, runtimes, and what have you to make sure that they're doing it correctly as well. So that's kind of the way that we think about this as well. Because these are exactly we're at the beginning of a whole very rich set of interesting business scenarios around delegation authorization. Another one that I love is the idea that I'm sure people like Amazon especially would be interested in scenarios where you could do deals, like have a deal where you want to sell books or you want to sell widgets and give IEEE members a discount on all the technology books on Wednesdays. Well, the hard part of that is how do you know who's an IEEE member? Today, often the way it's done is by giving them a special passcode, and you try to get that unique, and you don't worry too much that it's probably going to get passed around or what have you. Wouldn't it be great to be able to give the IEEE member a card, like you have in your wallet? You're a card-carrying IEEE member, and be able to present that card to the website and say, I actually am one, IEEE says so. And that's the kind of infrastructure that we've built into this system we call InfoCard. The idea is it's kind of like a wallet of cards, and the cards come from anywhere. They come from IEEE, they come from Amazon, they come from Microsoft, and these things are basically somebody vouching for a set of claims that you have. It might be you're a member of something, you've got a subscription to something, or simply that you are who you say you are, so that you can start to use those types of claims and that vouching for a relationship to do really interesting business opportunities like that. So.
It's interesting. Gudge and I, when we came into Microsoft, we both were comm heads, type system plumbers. And that's what fascinated me about the Indigo team and why I wanted to join your illustrious family. Although I forget who was there first, but it doesn't matter. But I'll tell you, the last almost 4 years, I figured out that the security system is really where the action is at. And that's really the high value add of the work that's happening. So it was a head turner for me. It was a surprise.
Right. I mean, we've spent a lot of time getting the messaging interop there, and it's been clear that the next layer to get to is the rich security and authorization. That's what people are struggling with today. That's the problems that they want to solve real business problems, and that's where a big chunk of our investment is going. That's where Gudge spends all his time.
That's where I spend all my time. Yes. Absolutely.
Jeff, what are you guys doing to authenticate users?
Okay, so our current generation of services, by and large, are queries sent to us. We don't have a whole lot that are transactional APIs that actually really make a change of state in our systems. So when developers register for our program, they are assigned a little string called a subscription ID. They pass that subscription ID into all the calls that they make to us. We can use that for basically counting how many calls they make. If we see an application doing something a little bit odd, we can go look up that subscription ID, talk to the developer, and say, hey, did you realize that we're returning errors for almost all the calls we make? Or maybe suggest more efficient ways to deal with them. As we're looking forward to the next generations of services, we absolutely for sure see the need for more levels of authentication. We're going to need to know who's on the other side. The way we've addressed this is by hiring people from Microsoft to help us with some of these things.
We want some of them back someday. But we understand. Cool. So, to change gears ever so slightly, I've got a question primarily for, I sent on my blog a request for questions for the panel. I got two. I'd like to pull one of them out of my hat now, which is primarily for Eric, although if you would like to tell us what we're going to do with the Indigo product planning, I'd love to hear it. Darrow Visanjo, good friend of mine.
Also from MSN.
I'm also another MSN.
Yes,
He's a PM over in MSN Spaces.
In Spaces backend, yeah.
Brilliant guy, love Dare, like a brother. Dare threw down the gauntlet. He would like to see Scott Guthrie and Eric Zinda suit up, get into a mud bath, and wrestle each other to the ground, and whoever is still left standing can be the winning API.
Okay, well, I'm up for that if that's...
So specifically, he wants to know, should I build my service using Atlas, or should I build my service using Indigo?
Well, I think the answer to that is the same answer as I would give to should I build my web service using WIDBE, the .NET framework version that's coming out in soon, or should I build my web service using Indigo? And the answer is WIDBE and Atlas have great support for web services today, the ability to do POCs, JSON encoding, that type of thing. If you need it today, that's what you should use. When Indigo comes out in the Vista wave, I definitely recommend that you take a look at that, because what we've added there is a whole new set of features. It's really just I view it as simply a versioning thing. There's a version that's coming out now, and there's a version that's coming out in the future. The version that's coming out in the future is going to have more features, and the version that's coming out now will be around for a whole long time, and people who need it today should use that.
Sure. And just to make, I don't think Dare got the point, which was when we did the Jamal demo, we actually used Indigo with JSON.
Right. And I don't know how you want to describe JSON or.
Yeah. So basically, what the folks who do DHTML and JavaScript clients want to talk to the backend services. If they were all using Internet Explorer, if only, they would be sending XML messages back and forth. Alas, there are other browsers out there, one of which, at least, doesn't support XML. That is, it does not have an XML parser built into it. That one happens to be Safari, right, from Apple. And so what the web development community has come up with, they're very crafty, smart bunch of developers, was they looked around and found another textual format that they could exchange back and forth called JSON. And JSON is a simple data model that aligns with most programming languages based on the notion of atoms, records, and sequences. And it has an easy to author, easy to parse textual representation. And just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about, if I had let me do a Fabricam demo. If I had a customer, if I was doing XML, I might write it like this. That's the Microsoft phone number. It is, in fact. And you can also use this phone number. So here's a simple data structure in XML. Hold on, I can't type and see at the same time. Close. Not bad, it's just text, and even when I'm not looking at my hands, I can type it in. Unfortunately, I can't count on sending this to a browser and know deterministically that the browser will be able to deal with it. I might be able to get away with using the HTML DOM parser, but even that's kind of, less reliable. So what the DHTML JavaScript folks have come up with is this thing called JSON, which says, I've got records and sequences and atoms. And so a record looks like this. It's basically a series of comma delimited label colon atom or label colon value elements. And the values, it's a recursive definition, so they can be either atoms or sequences or records. So I can say phone numbers, and then the square bracket is used for sequences. I can't type. String literal. Oop, I'm not going to put that one in. My wife will kill me.
No home phone numbers.
I'll call her up and try and get her to program Java. I don't want that. My family programs in Scheme, thank you very much. And I assume I typed the other one in. I'm just like too bad of a typist today. And then close the thing off, and we're done. So that's a JSON value, which again is just a text file. The whole web is built on text-based protocols. Anybody can spit it out. And at face value, it's just another data representation. It has a different data model than XML, but it's not one that's that hard to grok. And when we did the Atlas demo, in the Jamal keynote, when we added the JSON binding to our Indigo service, instead of sending something that looked like the thing up on top, we sent something that looked like the thing on the bottom. And because, the CLR has a data model, XML has a data model, JSON has a data model, we just write the impedance mismatch.
Right. And Indigo has specifically been designed because we know that there's a lot of different, these aren't the last data models we're going to see in the world.
Yeah.
And we've built in extensibility points to allow you to, at the highest level, write your app and not have to care about whether it's got angle brackets or square brackets with quotes in it, and plug in these encoders to say, actually, this time I want it to be the bottom one. No, this time I like it to be the top one. Write a single service that can be agnostic to how the characters are laid out on the wire, so that you've got the flexibility to have a single endpoint, for example, that exposes both of them. So if you want to have a service that you run on your public website that's accessible via the browser and also accessible via XML, for example, or SOAP, you can expose 3 endpoints from the same service and not have to encode the details of those 3 different encodings inside your code where you're trying to do actual business logic.
Cool. So we can expect to be able to do JSON apps in Indigo at some point.
Yep. JSON, REST, POX, WS star. We've got an MSMQ binding that allows you to talk to MSMQ. We've got a whole architecture that's specifically designed around being the single way you do messaging and allow customers to plug in different protocols and encodings to address all the different endpoints they want.
So you don't care what they use?
I don't care what they use. In fact, when we've talked to customers, what they've told us is, hey, it's great that you're doing WS star. We love it. There's some applications where that's useful. There's also applications where we need POX for various reasons. We don't have browsers that support this thing yet. Or we have existing business applications that are already running. And by the way, we don't want to upgrade all that stuff. We don't want to rewrite all this code. And so what they wanted was a single platform they can use to target all that stuff so that they can be, in some sense, isolated and more flexible with the pieces of code they deploy going forward and be able to integrate those existing systems together without having to write special services for every endpoint they want to touch. So
cool.
That's one of our major goals.
Cool. So on this topic, the other question I got on my blog, which was from a friend of mine, John Lamb, he basically put a very cryptic piece of code on my blog, and I'll write it to the best of my memory, and then we'll talk about what he was trying to state. He was basically saying something like this. I'm going to paraphrase ever so slightly. So the implication of what John was asking about was, if you take what web services do, which is I send a message, but be it just a URL or a structured piece of data, whether it be JSON or SOAP, those are details. Bottom line is, I send a message that has some structured information in it. The service takes that message, does some interpretation, and gives me back some results that may or may not have had side effects. Right? That's generally what we do. Right? And we keep inventing these silly, idiosyncratic little things like JSON or URL encoding or whatever. But it's all just syntactic sugar over the fact that I've given you some data. You're going to interpret the data and give me some data back. So what John is asking with this code fragment is, why don't we go all the way and allow you to just send arbitrary expressions to be evaluated on the server side and come back? So I'll start with you, Jeff, since you're building this AWS thing. When can I start sending you JavaScript code or C# code, and you'll just run it for me?
Probably not this week.
Can I have it by next Friday?
Well, there's a huge number of interesting issues around doing that. I think for us, we have massive amounts of scale in our servers. And we have, for example, when a single request hits our what you might call our front-end server, we take that request, we validate, we check to make sure that all the parameters we need are there. We then fork off essentially parallel requests to anywhere between 10 and 20 different internal services. So if you make a request for some data about a particular barbecue, let's say, we're going to send one request out to the item data service, another one out to the pricing service, another one to get reviews, another one to get the sales rank, and so forth. So our APIs have been designed within the fact that we have to hit all these different services in parallel. We don't have just one gigantic SQL database inside that we can do arbitrary joins against any. We can't join the pricing service against the sales rank service and then, further join that against catalog data to give you some really interesting result. So we don't have the regularity on the inside that would actually allow us to support generic expressions from the outside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay.
So is this something you anticipate eventually doing?
I wouldn't want to speak for all the folks building all those different services, but it's really, really complicated inside to make all these different things happen. And each of these internal services right now has their own ability to evolve and to scale and to grow as needed and to like have gigantic leaps forward in its own piece of functionality. But a lot of these services don't really know. Like if you go to talk to some random developer on on the page or the sales rank team, they don't necessarily know that they're participating in the Amazon Web Services program at all. They just know that they're putting services out on the network and a number of different clients are using them. If we had to like design a corporate API and then say, within the constraints of all the other things that you guys have to do to support the retail websites, you also are constrained by the fact that you're part of a query language, I don't think we'd be able to make progress very quickly.
And we're actually almost in the same boat on MSN search. Image search is sort of different from web search, is sort of different from news search. And then we have our instant answer feeds for stock quotes and sports scores and movie times. And these all evolve on separate teams with separate clusters and separate backends. And they get joined and shoved out the web front end in a nice, beautiful view for all of us to see on the website. But to be able to have a sort of a universal way to interact with these things almost pushes a level of complexity down to a distributed group of folks that's going to make it a lot harder. Now, the one thing that we have going for us is we do have a very expressive query language where we have a bunch of modifiers that we can bring in and basically be sort of pretty descriptive just in the query syntax. So, for instance, we added a new operator called hasFeed, and now it'll only return pages that have RSS feeds on them. And so that's only going to that one portion of our system now. It almost allows you to direct. But once you try and join things together, it gets more complex again.
What are you guys doing in this space?
Boy, well, we have a similar problem that these two have had where, we're not building our internal infrastructure to support complete random queries of our data. I think we were having a conversation earlier this week about how just insane it would be if somebody were to submit to you a query and then you just ran that query on their behalf. It just opens up all sorts of implications, perhaps even, problems over web services that you have with SQL injections via a form and a web page. So, the randomness is not something that we're currently investigating. What we are trying to do is evaluate what functions our developers want via feedback, and then actively building out that functionality, whether it means building combining web services that we currently offer, or developing new web services to meet that need. It's just too early, I feel, to actually be thinking about having a broad query language for your own system at this point.
Well, in fact, wouldn't it be a pretty bad idea to support a feature like that in terms of, imagine if Jeff went and exposed all of his backends to the world in an unbounded way. The amount of coupling you would have between any client who calls in and finds some random little piece of code that a developer, in the back end of Amazon stuck in there, the ability to version those services, change them over time, without having very explicit contracts about what's going on, you're going to have a disaster in your hands, which I think is why we've seen these guys not doing it.
That's right.
Wow, right?
Yeah, and by the way, you just touched on another extremely painful point, which is versioning. Versioning's huge.
We'll come back.
Okay.
It's on my list.
All right, I'm ready.
Were you going to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've heard you, Don, talk about service-based systems, and you tell us all about how important contract is. And if you are going to support an expression language, even ignoring all of the security aspects of that, you need to think hard about what the contract is for that expression language, and you need to set expectations as to what people are going to be allowed to do and what they're not going to be allowed to do. And as Eric just said, it seems like a very slippery slope that kind of just goes like that very fast.
Sure, but I guess the interesting question is, people wind up reinventing these variations on these systems over and over again. I know that within the WS Star stack, which I'm partially guilty for too, I can think of at least two places where we have what's kind of an ad hoc query right? The two ones that come to mind are WS Metadata Exchange, right, where I basically can request, the query dialect, again, is extremely constrained, right? We basically only have 2 query parameters. But again, we wound up reinventing a query language. The other one is in WS Eventing and WS Enumeration, I believe, but certainly WS Eventing, right? The subscription actually is a query, right? The subscription is describing, a side effect bearing expression that's going to be evaluated on the service, and even includes a user pluggable filter predicate. So I can put XPath expressions in there. I can put in whatever else I might want to put in there.
Yeah, and I think that services that are going to support that kind of thing are still going to constrain what expressions they'll actually accept. I mean, I'm not going to deploy a service which is going to accept arbitrary XPath because I know the nasty things you can do with that language.
No one on the planet knows better than you the nasty things you can do because I see you do those things when you come to Redmond.
Well,
Cool.
Thanks, Don. I got to take off, unfortunately. Got to get back to Redmond for a meeting this afternoon, but thanks for letting me crash your party here.
Thank you, Seth. Give it up for Seth. Seth has to go back. He's got a flight to catch.
So just to point out some of the practical difficulties of doing something like this. So let's take one of our services, like the one that gives us catalog data. Right, there's multiple tens of millions of items in our catalog, and there's a bunch of servers that are really well tuned to be able to service a particular kind of query against those things. Well, some outside developer could say, oh, I can detect duplicates or similar items by joining this 10, 20 million item table against itself and doing some cool join. Our database guys, like, in a million years would never be open to letting outside queries, and there's every index on every one of our tables is hand-tuned to make sure that we can respond very, very quickly. Suddenly, things that are under their tight control, and even within the company, there's like this one table full of folks that get together and say, how is everything going to be organized, and how is everything going to be keyed and indexed? To suddenly let the outside world say, oh, we're going to use this in high-volume, random, unanticipated ways. It's beyond the state of the art right now.
But you'll get there, right? You'll be the first one to be there.
We'll try.
Great. Before we talk about versioning, just related to this query thing, one thing I want to ask you about, Jeff, is what's the status of, is it OpenSearch? You guys have this URL, XML-backed URL. You basically have the XML metadata against a URL query for querying various pieces of information. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, sure. So we actually announced something really cool this week in conjunction with the IE7 team. A little bit of background. A couple of, I don't actually know how long ago. So we have this site called a9.com, which is a search engine. And the folks at A9 wanted the ability to plug in various kinds of searches. So they decided that what they could do to take advantage of all the different data providers out in the world would be, let's not design yet another query language, another response format. Let's actually say any outside search engine that can produce RSS with a few little modifications to the RSS to allow pagination through search results. They said anybody that can produce RSS and can actually give us paginated result sets, let's say 10, 20, 100 at a time, any of those data providers can very easily plug into a9.com as essentially an additional search engine, an additional column of results on a9.com. So that was really cool, and they announced that. They called it OpenSearch because they wanted to go out and invite lots of developers to build things. They have somewhere between 200 and 400 different types of searches configured in there. Just a few weeks ago, I got email from contact on the IE team who said, we've seen what you guys did with OpenSearch. We think it's really cool. We'd love to actually expand on this and make IE7 also available, able to call OpenSearch, but of course, we need a few little special tweaks. So they got together, A9 and Microsoft. They augmented the format. They revved it up to 1.1. So IE7 will now be yet another client of this OpenSearch interface. So you have to actually think of this as what I think Microsoft once called a service provider interface, or an SPI.
Yes.
So if you think of an API is usually one implementation and potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands of different callers of that implementation. So an SPI says there'll be a small number of callers and lots of implementations. So if you have any ability to expose your system's data in RSS form, with just minor tweaks to your RSS to put in, you need to have one more tag that says this is where you put the parameter in to say which chunk of search results you want. You can be a search provider, first A9, which is pretty cool, and then second IE7, which I think is just really, really cool.
Yeah, I actually really fell in love with OpenSearch when I found it. Have you talked to Seth's guys to get the MSN Search to play along?
Not yet, but I will definitely do that.
Okay. I hope they do. And if not, then I will shame them into trying
The whole story of this is actually on the IE blog right now. It was
Wow.
last time I looked, it was the top story on the IE blog.
Do you know the URL for the IE blog?
No, but Google does.
I'm sorry. Many search engines do, and the whole premise of OpenSearch is anyone can be a search provider.
Yes, absolutely.
How dare you single out a single one?
Well, I know that one works. How about that?
Oh!
I know I hit it just this morning with IE blog, and I got the right link, so I know for sure I can.
Well, now I feel like this is a challenge that I have to. You've thrown down the gauntlet. Is this machine hooked up to the
Go
web?
for it.
Are we going to go check on A9?
Go for it.
Yeah, let's go find out.
Anything can happen.
Drum roll.
Well, we have an IP address. That's good. So since Seth isn't here, we're going to give him props. We'll do his first. And so what is it? What should I be searching for?
I just searched for IE space blog.
Hang on, let me make the font bigger.
Yeah.
You might want to run the search first before you make that bigger.
I might run one search first. Here we go. IE blog. Isn't that a nice, clean design of that MSN search page? Didn't those guys do a great job? Isn't that beautiful looking?
There we go.
IE blogs. Okay, now let's go to the other search engine.
You didn't know you were coming here for the search engine shootout, did you?
Don, is there any other questions we can field while you're bringing up the...
No, I want the tension. I want the tension in the room. I want everybody to be focused.
This is the price you pay.
See, the beauty of federated search is it doesn't matter which one you use. Isn't that right?
Can we talk about the beauty of tab browsers, too?
Yes. I'd love for you to promote IE7. It'd be a fantastic thing.
Download it today.
Yes. Cool. So it shows up everywhere. So any search engine you use would be great. Should we give them a demonstration of OpenSearch? Or do you...
Sure. Go for it.
Okay. Do you know how to do it?
Yeah. You go hit a9.com.
Cool.
You got to look for the IE blog here.
Yeah, try the IE blog here. So each of those checkboxed items is a separate search provider. And each of those is being hit in parallel. So right now we've got web results and we've got image searching results. And if you click some of those others, like if you hit the More Choices button, you can actually configure in various search providers.
I can barely read that. Where's more choices? Oh,
A
here.
little bit up, right there. So hit the checkbox and then hit the select and make some choices. There you go. So if you're actually logged into a9.com with your Amazon account, you can configure in as many different searchers as you would like. You've got blog search, and there you go. So all these providers are now using RSS as their interface to deliver search results to A9 and to IE7.
And for me to plug into your search federation system, as I recall, I simply just write a little XML metadata file that describes how
That's
to
right.
parameterize.
I actually did it for my own site in like I did all the integration work in like less than 2 hours, including designing a graphic and
Yeah,
everything.
it's pretty simple stuff,
It
which is
works.
great. I mean simple in the nice way.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. So let's talk about versioning. Then I'd like to open it up and hear what these nice people want to hear about. So tell us, how's versioning working for you? You guys get it right the first time, so you don't have to worry about this, right?
That's right. We're still on 1.0, and nothing's ever going to change. Yeah, actually, we are on our 2.0 of our web services, and we've actually created not only a web service but also an SDK client wrapper for our web services. And there's pros and cons to doing this. One is now you've got two things to version. So you might ask, why would we not just use the WSDL reference and let everyone build their own client? And the main reason why we didn't do that is that the various toolkits actually implement or create a class library differently. And some of them don't work at all. So the various standards are or the various implementations are different. For example, in a, I think it's a BEA toolkit in Java, if you have a circular reference or I guess in your WSDL, the thing just explodes. So you can't even build your client. Anyway, the point being is that we really didn't want to have to deal with supporting the numerous various class implementations out there, and how how much code is in these actually things in these libraries. It's huge. So trying to debug these was perilous. So we ended up creating class libraries and delivering them in SDKs in PHP, .NET, Java, classic ASP.NET, Cold Fusion. You can get to them at paypal.com/SDK, and which helped a lot in troubleshooting the problems that our developers were having. But now we have versions of not just our web service, but in all of these SDKs. So I guess the pros and the cons is you got to be prepared to support all this. But the pro is that at least you have an idea of what you're troubleshooting.
Cool. Jeff, how's versioning working out for you guys?
Versioning is a gigantic pain for us. We rev our service relatively frequently. We add new APIs. We do our absolute best to be a platform and to keep backward compatibility in place, so with the expectation that old applications should continue to work against newer versions of the API. We've looked at a number of different solutions, and as low-tech as it sounds, we've ended up that every time we rev the service, like we just rolled out a new release yesterday, we actually rev out a new version of the WSDL file with a version number in the URL for the WSDL, which makes a lot of folks just like gag and say, no, there's a better way. But we've looked at some of those better ways, and either the tools don't support them, or okay, good, so we're not doing the wrong thing.
Dude, if I was in your shoes, that's what I'd do too.
Yep.
WSDL's cheap.
Yeah, it's been fairly painful. We've had to educate our developer community about the right way to deal with this. We're learning as we go that there's even, you can make certain changes to a WSDL file, and it might appear to work even if you didn't change the version, and others you can't. And we're still really a lot to learn and a lot to educate the developer community on.
Cool.
Quick question for you, Jeff. Have
Sure.
you guys thought about actually creating a WSDL for each specific web services call? So that you don't have to rev every single person's client?
I would worry about the number of moving parts in doing something like that, because we have lots and lots of different APIs, and they share a set of data structures. It seems to be the number of different failure points for people that thought they were using all the latest pieces, but they were using N-1 of the latest pieces, but they had one straggler in some other file they forgot to include. We spend a lot of time helping folks to debug their applications, and quite often you work through all the things that could be the problems, and it's like, oh darn, I forgot to update the date, or I just forgot to make one little change somewhere. So I'd prefer to go to less opportunities for them to do that rather than more.
The particular problem that we're trying to solve is that if somebody implements a payment solution, I mean, that's a lot different than implementing an affiliate-based linking solution. And you absolutely do not want to require a merchant to update their commerce API every 6 months or 3 months. So one of the things we're looking at is perhaps offering a particular URL, a WSDL, for a payment API that's just not going to change in the next 2 years guaranteed, that type of thing. And then perhaps the search-based or less critical APIs maybe have a separate WSDL file.
Well, what I'm hearing from you, Dave, the one lesson I'm learning from you is money changes everything.
Yes, it does.
Eric, what are you guys doing in Indigo to handle this versioning nightmare?
So there's a few different things. I mean, I think you heard a good both sides of the spectrum here. There are ways to version things at a much more granular level, and to the extent that you've got a set of customers who aren't going to change what they're doing, you're going to be more willing to take advantage of those features. It's certainly a lot easier in many cases to just version the whole darn thing, much like we did in COM, new interface every time you touch something. But if you want old clients to be able to use the new thing, then that's a challenge. So there's a whole range of things. What we've done in Indigo is enabled, no surprise, you to do any of these scenarios. And there's a few different ways you do it. We'll allow you to, when you specify your contract, you can put in the version numbers of the APIs that are described in there. And when you specify so that's the operations that you're supporting. And when you design the data that you're going to support, you do the same thing. I mean, it's a pretty simple answer on that front. inside of Indigo, and we as a platform company have had a lot of the challenges that you've described too, so we enable our customers to version their stuff. We also build protocols that must be versioned that customers leverage. So we've got versioning support built into our architecture so that, when the next version of WS Security comes out, or the next version of, or some protocol gets versioned for one reason or another, we can add that in and support both of those protocols. So there's some deep in the infrastructure versioning at the protocol level as well. And then we also have the problem of, hey, by the way, we're a library, so we've got CLR versioning, so that when we ship with the with WinFX with Vista, and then we upgrade the libraries later, how do we solve that? So we've had to hit all these problems as well.
So, Gudge, you've been around this space quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that the biggest problem with versioning is it requires foresight, and it's almost always done in hindsight. And we have a bunch of techniques that we've kind of come up with, and my boss, Doug Purdy, has spent a lot of time thinking about this. And in some cases, we've come up with very sophisticated ways of dealing with versioning that have just ended up not being tractable. And I think that, hearing that people are just taking simple approaches and saying, we'll just publish a new WSDL and stick a version, simple has got to be the right approach. We need to take a really simplistic approach to it, because right now I just don't think we have the kind of body of knowledge, really, to address the problem in a way which is just going to make it work for everybody. So the simplest approach we can possibly take is probably the right answer.
Given the problem. I mean, each of these guys have a different...
So using XML schema element substitution groups in concert with redefine is not the way to solve this problem?
I suspect that's not the approach that most people should be using. Yeah.
Darn.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because I love redefine like a brother.
Good for you. Sick bastard. So, anybody else have any questions out there, or shall we call it a night? Please walk up to a mic. Assuming there is a mic.
There's somebody running for the door.
Is there anybody still there? I can't actually see anything.
I wanted to ask about debugging. Somebody touched on that helping developers debug the APIs. So a lot of times the functionality exposed is very coarse-grained, and there's a lot of stuff happening behind the call. What have been your experiences with supporting developers who use your APIs?
Well, I can take a quick stab at that. First of all, when we first launched our APIs, we absolutely did not have good error code responses. So we found ourselves having to figure that out with the developer and troubleshoot what they were doing. A great way to solve this problem is to actually provide rich data in the error code or the error responses when a problem occurs. And that not only helps us in our support issues, it can save hours, even days of troubleshooting for a developer.
A lot of what Dave said is very, very true. Provide as much detail in the responses as possible. One thing that we're always very, very cautious of is some of these subsystems that we use like to just dump out stack traces with all these internal variable values by default. Our security guys don't like us to be making really evident what pieces of internal infrastructure we're using. So we can't have implementation details leaking out through our APIs of, oh, you guys are using this piece of Java or this XSLT processor or whatever, because once they figure that out and they say, oh, gee, you've got version 1.7 of this thing, and I know there's an exploit for that, I'll just go reach in and try to tweak that exploit. So we return very, very detailed things, but we always return things that we actually invent ourselves. We don't just pass in values or take values from other pieces and just echo those through. Another thing we found that can be helpful in extreme cases, we return a unique transaction identifier with each call. And if absolutely necessary, we can take that transaction identifier and we can see the detailed internal operations that were performed on behalf of that transaction. We don't do that very often because there's a lot of manual labor involved in searching through logs and so forth. But in the last resort, gee, I can't quite figure out what's going on wrong here, we'll debug it that way.
Eric, what are you guys doing?
Well, I guess there's a few different angles. One of the things that I'm hearing here is the varied experience that we've had with Indigo, which is there's no silver bullet. What you end up having to do up front, just like versioning, and often we don't, is you got to step back and think about how the people are going to use the system and what information they want, and you actually add features in to do this. So if you look, like Indigo is a perfect case study. If you look at our beta 1 feature set that shipped many months ago, you look at the exceptions that got exposed and the traces that we had, it was a lot closer to the internal stack dump stuff that Jeff's talking about. You could probably figure out what was going on. There was certainly a lot of information in there somewhere, but it wasn't all that usable. And there was certainly a bunch of stuff that we probably wouldn't have wanted to expose to the internals of how Indigo works. So what we've done since then is step back, said, okay, here, how are people going to use this system? What are the common failure cases? Where we want to put specific rich features that are purely meant to diagnose and debug the system at runtime in, and go do work to do that, not just have it kind of accidentally fall out through assertions that developers put in the code, as they're writing in the natural course of events. But it's a lot of work, and you have to then, like a way that we're testing the system is, the way we run our stress lab is we build these apps, put them under heavy load, and they fall over. The first thing our developers do when debugging a stress failure is they grab the traces and look at the traces. And if they can't figure out what happened with the traces, they enter bugs against our tracing system and say, hey, this was no use to me, and then they get to go in and use the tools that they are happy to use, that you can dig into the registers and what have you. So you've got to dog food the thing. You've got to use it a lot to figure out what is the information you need and what are you going to hit in the real world.
Cool. Next question.
Yeah, related to versioning, as you version your services, do you find it easier to keep that implementation class, a single implementation class, and deal with the version and the new type message inside there, or do you find it easier to deploy a second instance of the class for each version?
I didn't quite get it. What was the
So
question?
I'll try and paraphrase, which is there's two approaches. Well, there's many approaches, but two popular approaches to dealing with versioning is the hold your implementation constant and version on the outside, which means effectively you've built some sort of adapter that takes message format A and turns it into A prime. The second approach is just write a new type and let them live side by side, and you wind up. The downside, of course, you have a proliferation of implementations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've done both in my at the time that I've been building services. For a lot of people, it comes down to how many endpoints they want to manage. If they want to have people having to learn about a new endpoint, the presence of a new endpoint, as opposed to just sending messages to the same endpoint that they've always sent stuff to, and then just
like these two examples that we had
doing
earlier,
transformations. I tend to favor the transformation approach. I think it's just fits with the way that I think about systems generally. Most of the things I've ever worked on, I've ended up with some kind of transformation pipeline in, so that just feels like a very natural fit for me. But I think it's one of those cases where there is no real right answer. You need to do something that works for you and the people that are going to use the stuff that you're using.
Well, and it also has a lot to do with the scope of the change, right? I mean,
yeah.
If you're doing a massive set of additions to an API, there's probably going to be one approach versus
yes. I mean,
simple.
at some point, the transformation pipeline becomes so complicated that you're better off just deploying a new thing. But it can be a very useful tool for kind of managing that change. So maybe you'll end up doing both. You'll end up using a kind of transformation initially, and then once you've reached a kind of fairly large delta from where you started, then start thinking about deploying a separate endpoint.
So the official timekeeper of PDC came up and did not do this.
Oh, okay.
He did the opposite of this. So why don't you take 15 seconds to say some parting words? We'll just code through the panel this way and be done. Gudge.
I hope you've enjoyed PDC. I hope this panel's been useful. If you have any other questions, please send me a mail at gudge@microsoft.com. I'd love to hear people tell me their experiences with authorization and all of this web services stuff. So hope you're enjoying it. Have a good trip back.
Great. The Zinster.
The same goes for me. I'm Eric Z, E-R-I-C-Z at Microsoft.com. I'd love to hear more about your experiences deploying sites, what works, what doesn't work, what you'd like to see in Indigo.
Jim.
Moving on.
Great.
Okay.
Jim Barbarino.
jbarr, J-B-A-R-R at Amazon.com. Enter our developer contest, Amazon.com/AWS. Love to hear from developers. Love to see the cool stuff that developers have built, and always happy to talk to you.
And you can reach me at developer@paypal.com, easy to remember. And you can also try developer.paypal.com. And if you have any other questions, please come up. I'd be happy to answer them.
Great. Well, I learned a lot. Thanks for coming up. I hope you guys did too. And have a great PDC. Thanks.